Okay, America, here it is. A lot of young people think the drug laws in foreign countries are not as strictly enforced as the drug laws here. Well, that's wrong. In Mexico, possession can get you a 2 to 9 year sentence. In the United Kingdom, 5 to 7 years. In Italy, 3 years. And in Turkey, up to life imprisonment for selling drugs. Those are the laws. There's no way around them. One fact will come through loud and clear. When you're busted for drugs over there, you're in for the hassle of your life.
This probably never happened any other time in movie history where someone's events that they lived through was brought onto the screen and depicted in a manner where it really misrepresented an entire country, an entire group of people.
Did you ever see Midnight Express?
I did, yeah.
I am always afraid that I'll go to Turkey, and as I'm leaving, like, they'll pull my shirt up and I'll have, like, for no reason, hash bricks strapped to my stomach. Because that movie, to this day,
I know, it's scary.
Freaks me out.
This movie was a thunderbolt. It just exploded, and the whole country was talking about it.
It scared the hell out of a lot of us. And I sure my dreams of getting a microbus and driving to Istanbul and smoking hash ended by the end of the movie.
You were an advocate for him in the film, and so that you felt the injustice visited upon him far outweighed the thing he did.
For Hollywood to make him look to be a hero is a disgrace.
There must have been a period of time when he must have relished those son of a bitches. They deserve everything that they get for what I went through, and this is a little bit of my payback.
Joey, have you ever been in a Turkish prison?
Made headlines by carrying off a nearly beyond belief escape from a filthy and terror-filled Turkish prison. He had been caught smuggling about 2.5 pounds of hashish, a drug made from the seeds of the female marijuana plant. The young American's name was Billy Hayes.
William and Dorothy Hayes say they were always opposed to an escape attempt. They didn't think their son could possibly get out. But they knew Bill was becoming restless. In a letter to them last month, he wrote, "I have waited for the local train too long. I'm going to hop on the Midnight Express." Then on October 10th, the State Department informed them that Bill had escaped from his prison 8 days before. Details are still sketchy. At 5:30 last Saturday morning, Bill called his parents from Salonika, Greece. He said he was fine and that he'd be home by the weekend.
When he called on the phone, I heard him the other morning, his voice just sounded so strange to me, and I had 1,000 questions that I thought I would want to say when I heard him, and all I could say was, "How are you?" And I just couldn't get any more words out. It was just a very emotional experience for me.
Mrs. Hayes says she won't go to the airport to meet Bill. She wants to see him for the first time without a lot of cameras and people. She doesn't know yet what she'll say to him that first time, but she does know what she'll feed him. There are 40 pounds of steaks down in the freezer. From North Babylon, Long Island, Chris Wallace, News Center 4.
When he came home, it was just, we were so concerned about his mental state. And it was funny, my dad and I went to JFK, and they held him on the plane, let everybody else come off. We walked on. Billy looked great, he felt great, and we said, Billy, there's 100 press out there waiting. Are you up for this? And Yeah, sure, what the heck, I'll talk to them.
I stepped off the airplane and there were 100 reporters surrounding me. It was incredible. Lights, cameras, microphones, and people asking me, what was it like? What's it like to be home? I said, I don't know, I've only been here 2.5 minutes. I hadn't been home, I hadn't seen my mother or anything.
I do remember questions about asking if the CIA had assisted him in his escape, and Billy laughed. I mean, just the thought of the CIA helping him was a joke.
We could have used the CIA.
We sure could have.
I hadn't seen my mother in 5 years, or my sister, or my old grandmother. It was about this high and about this wide. It was very, very fine feeling to get back and see them. I was just glowing, tears coming out of everyone's face and laughing.
5 years of waiting and waiting. My wife and I just couldn't believe it. All of a sudden, we got a telephone call one morning that he had escaped and he was on his way home, just out of this world.
So I called him. I could hardly talk. And here's Billy on the phone. Barbara, babe. As if none of this had ever happened.
And I remembered noticing that he looked 10 years older than I did. And I remember seeing that his hair was still brown from the shoe polish that he had put in his hair to hide out while he was hiding out in Greece. Actually, at that point, he said, I have an idea. He says, I'm going to write this down and I'm going to try to do a book.
Now, Bill, you're making a speaking tour of sorts, lecturing in high schools, I understand. What are you telling kids?
Actually, I haven't begun my first one yet, but whatever I tell them, I hope it sinks in that they just shouldn't follow in the direction that I went. I mean, it's your life. I mean, I was lucky to get out of this thing.
How did you actually escape?
I actually escaped off an island. It was a prison island. The island itself was 20 miles off the coast. Since we worked, we went out into fields and worked in a factory. I canned stuff. I worked like I'm doing monkey work on these canning machines. What I had to do was beat the sea, because they considered the sea to be the wall around the island. And, what I needed really was a boat. It took a while for timing to be right, but fishing boats would come into our harbor occasionally, with little wooden dinghies behind them. The only time they actually stay in the harbor at night is when a storm blows up, it makes the sea so rough that they can't stay out there. On the day of the escape, there was a big storm, a lot of wind and rain and clouds blowing. All day the storm blew, and the sea got so rough that by evening time, when I finished work, I went down to the harbor, and a lot of fishing boats had been strung out. They were anchored there for the night. So this I knew would be the day that one way or the other I was going to get out of here. So I hid in a little hiding place I had, and when it was dark enough, about 10:30, 11 o'clock, swam out to one of these fishing boats and cut the line, the rope. I had a knife from the factory I worked in on the island, and got in this little dinghy and started to row. I rowed across to the opposite side.
How far was that?
About 20 miles.
And was able to spend the next 2 days running and hiding through Istanbul, dyeing my hair black, avoiding guards, eventually swimming a river into Greece. Very long, melodramatic escape in actuality.
This was a very exciting story. I mean, escaping from a prison island after an unjust sentence and making your way through a military area and after a countrywide manhunt hasn't turned you up. This is made for Hollywood. And after he came back, within a week, we had a book and a movie deal.
Is it a fact that you two guys read a news account of Billy Hayes going to jail in Turkey and the whole picture sprang just from that? There was no book first or anything like that, just seen in the papers?
It was Peter.
I had just left Columbia Pictures, and I had heard a story on a Reuters newswire, and we just escaped from the prison and escaped all the way across Turkey into Greece. And I got in touch with the English agent who was handling his return to America, met with him, flew him out to Hollywood.
Going to Hollywood for Billy was as big a deal as he could imagine from his perspective on life and what would make life thrilling and exciting.
Hollywood to him was like, the change was like going back to the Turkish prison. I mean, it was a completely different atmosphere and ambiance, and it was a dip in cold water, but he was blown away by the whole experience. And then we started the process of a book being made and then ultimately a film.
Average time to write a book is usually about a year, maybe a little longer. We didn't have that luxury. There was so much interest in getting film going that we wanted to get the book out, and our editor put a bonus clause in our contract. We would get a bonus percentage of royalties if we finished this book in 3 months.
Billy got caught up in this whole tidal wave of Midnight Express hysteria when he got back. and he went along with it, as I think anybody would have done. I mean, he's a great opportunity to make money, be famous, etc. Who wouldn't take advantage of that, especially coming out of prison dead broke?
I definitely noticed a change in his personality once he started getting media attention. He was being called for interviews left and right, and he never once took me with him.
You know what you're doing with this experience? You're making it work for you. You know, you could make it work against you. You could spend the rest of your life crying because you really lost 5 years of your life, which to you is...
Crying helped, Tom. I'd have cried for 5 years if it would have got me out.
Now you've done the book, you got the... Make it work for you.
I guess this fellow here has become something of a cult figure. His name is Billy Hayes.
These 3 young men all claim to have spent 5 years in a Turkish jail for smuggling hashish. Only one of them really did. The other 2 are imposters and will try to fool the panel on To Tell the Truth.
When he told the story of his escape, you wondered, did he really swim across the Bosphorus? Did he hold on to the boat? Did he escape across Greece? How much of it was truth and how much of it was fantasy? And, you know, I don't know where the embellishment ended and the facts began or vice versa, but it was a compelling story, and nobody could prove him wrong.
He had written, the book was very evocative and told the story. And Peter Guber was the driver of that movie. Peter had read my script of Platoon in 1976, and he had been very, very, very taken with it. I'd also known him a little bit before. I'd been close on a few things, and this was really my first major assignment. I met Billy, as I remember, for some 4 days in a hotel in New York, and I was fascinated by his story. And we went through all the story, the details. I wrote all my notes down. And then I don't remember really seeing him. I went off to London to write the screenplay. I don't remember really seeing him or consulting him much again.
I literally bumped into Peter Guber. He said, I've got this book. And he gave me the galley proofs of what was Midnight Express. So it's completely fortuitous, really, that... Then I read it on the plane on the way back home, and I quite liked it. And then I phoned Putnam about it because he had told me that totally incidentally, he was going to go and work with Guber in a new company.
We made a deal with him where I would do it if Alan did, and Alan did it if I would, and that would allow us to bid our price up a bit. I actually earned more for Midnight Express than I'd earned for the previous 10 movies all put together.
Parker and Putnam were not welcoming at all. I was an American. I think that they were unhappy with the idea of an American writing the script and being forced on them by Peter Guber.
He was in the back room. We had a spare back room, and he was like tapping away on an old-fashioned typewriter. And we just avoided him, quite frankly. I can't say it was a wonderful creative collaboration. I had very little to do with anything, really, because we would tiptoe out at night, you know, in case he would hear us leave, and because he might say, oh, you guys, do you want to have dinner? And we'd go, oh, no, because I don't know that any of us liked him, and he certainly didn't like us.
Oliver delivered the script, and I was in my office in Soho Square, and Alan was in his, which was around the corner in Marlborough Street, and we both sat down and read it. And I was blown away. And I phoned Alan, and I thought it was going to be a difficult conversation. And he picked up the phone. I said, Al, I've just finished the script. He said, I know, it's fucking brilliant.
It's one of the best screenplays ever written. It's just alive, it's vital. It has an energy about it, which is just, I've never read, as I say, before or since. So although we didn't really like him very much, old Oliver, he's a pretty clever bloke.
The irony is I wrote a good script, and they really were honest enough, I have to say, they were honest enough to say, hey, look, we like this script. We want to make this movie. And that was it. I never was consulted about the shooting, never invited to Malta, and never even invited to the Cannes Film Festival when it was premiered there. It was really a shoddy treatment. I would not do that to a writer who worked with me. I'd give him some recognition. And the irony is I did get recognition, and much more than they ever thought I would get.
The winner is Oliver Stone for Midnight Express.
I'm deeply honored, and on behalf of all the Midnight Express people,
and with some consideration for all the men and women all over the world who are in prison tonight, I thank you.
Once I created the song which Alan liked, he was not that interested in telling me what he wanted. He just said, just do it. And I must say, I didn't have any experience, so I just did exactly what I wanted. And I thought to myself, if they like it, they like it. If they don't, then I just have to redo it. So I just got crazy with all the new sounds. The synthesizer was a new thing, and the wah-wah and the thing here. And if I listen now, I say, wow, I was quite courageous to do all that stuff. But obviously, Alan Parker liked it, and I guess the public liked it.
The winner is Giorgio Moroder from Midnight Express.
This is my first score. Thank you very much to the producers.
Your first score?
Yes.
The studio are quite keen on having a more evident star. Our argument, we wanted to cast somebody who 2/3 of the way through the film, the audience would believe wasn't going to make it.
Brad, by far and away, was the most intense and the one that we loved the most. And we liked him as a person, and we liked his incredible commitment to the role. The biggest problem was where to shoot it, because every time we got a handle on a place we would like to be, the Turkish government moved in and very effectively managed to nix us. So we lost Italy, Spain, and Yugoslavia. The thing I was most fascinated by, actually, was the power of the Turkish government to influence a commercial decision in Israel. To get chased out 3 or 4 countries to make a movie, someone very, very, very senior is pulling that string. That isn't happening at a low level. And only because this rather crazy Prime Minister, Malta, Don Mintoff, had had his own falling out with the Turkish government, we'll be able to make it in Malta. That's why we ended up in Malta.
To be back out here today among these people, I know they're actors, and I know we're on a set, but my gut feeling is that fear comes back that I lived with every day for 5 years.
You met Billy Hayes?
This is very unfair. No.
This is
it's
Brad
privilege. Davis. That's what it is, especially after hearing what you just said about how you feel about the movie and the people inside and what we hope it's going to affect. Because, yeah, we're together on that for sure.
There was a fusion between Billy and Brad, you know, where one started, the other left off, and one left off. They fed off one another. They don't look the same, but there's a certain energy they have. They just seem to emote that.
He couldn't get over the fact that here he is in the midst of this whirlwind. He became real good friends with Brad Davis when they made the movie. So yeah, he was living the Hollywood life and enjoying it.
When he got to LA, he was totally entranced with the scene. And I think it occurred to him, this is what I could do with my life. I could become an actor. And I wouldn't be surprised if he thought, I'm acting all the time anyway.
Bigger and bigger you jump out of there. Let all of these people know about that. They know that's the only thing that really fucking counts, because when everything else is going bullshit, when you got...
Yeah, I met Billy. He was a mess. He was a mess in terms of, he was very frenetic, he was very nervous, he was very tense.
I got myself out of prison, but Eric freed me in a lot of ways of other prisons that I was still in.
I want you to let everybody in this room know how important it is for you to work as an actor and to be accepted as an artist.
I started to realize that he needed time. It was psychological necessity that he have the time to break loose like this.
She knew so much about me. I didn't want to be that exposed to someone.
I'm trying to be an actor now. It's what I'm working towards. And I guess in a way I've always been a ham and looking for recognition of sorts. But it's very strange to be recognized as being a hash smuggling escaped convict, which is really what the movie has done for me.
Every spring for the past 30 years, the jet set from around the world has gathered in the south of France for their version of a state fair. Only in this case, it is Cannes, the film festival. It's also an excuse for a lot of glamorous parties and publicity stunts.
To open a picture in Cannes in the mid-70s that had not been released in the United States was an act of daring do. Columbia didn't really want to release this film. Not only did they not believe in the film, they wanted the film to fail. And so, Cannes it went to, hoping they would die an unseemly death.
C'est un électrochoc que le public de Cannes a subi aujourd'hui. Midnight Express est le film le plus violent jamais représenté au festival.
By the time we got to the gala evening, everybody wanted to see the film. And it was because there was an electricity about it that people were responding to. And they weren't responding to it in a positive way, they were responding to it. There were people on the Cosette were stopping me, saying, how dare you make this film?
Et il n'était que de voir l'autre soir, à la sortie de Midnight Express, une salle en tenue de soirée qui applaudissait à tout rompre un film qui est le plus violent qu'on ait vu dans un festival, et vraiment même le plus violent qu'on ait vu dans aucune salle.
Thought that the whole ethos of Cannes was that one nation should not criticize another nation, which is why they thought the whole film was, financed by the CIA, which is kind of a silly notion.
The night before the screenings, I was in a very, very, very high state of anxiety. So part of me, I guess, was anticipating trouble, more trouble than I hadn't thought about that before.
So we went to the ballet that night, a couple thousand people, black tie with Alan Parker and David and myself. And the audience murmured throughout the film a few times, murmured, and I said, uh-oh. And the film ended, and there wasn't any noise. And Alan said to me, we're in big trouble. We're in deep poo-poo. We had to make it out the back door. The lights came up after the credits. 2,000 people stood up and cheered. We went from the abyss of failure to the joy and ecstasy of success in that 10 seconds.
The greatest ego trip for anyone is the Cannes Film Festival, because the gala evening, if they like what you do, and you get the standing ovation and everybody, goes crazy, and for him to experience that dressed in a white suit, I mean, what does that tell you? It's like, look at me, isn't it really?
At one point, I looked and this blonde-haired angel just appeared out of the crowd. She asked me to dance, and we connected, and we've been together ever since.
It's probably mostly a basket case that night, having come from such isolation, all those years in prison, and all at once having the world kind of seeking you out in a pretty crazy way. He wasn't really prepared to handle that.
Billy Hayes, I don't think I've been in a theater, and I can't remember how long, that was so charged with emotion as everyone was tonight. Having seen the film now in its entirety, tell me what you're feeling.
I'm quite drained, actually. I didn't expect myself to react the way I did. I certainly didn't know that the audience would react the way it did. And I'm crying. It caught me quite unawares.
Was it like seeing your life unfold, those 5 years that took place in that horrible prison?
That's the reason, because I was back there. And I didn't really think that the movie would affect me like that strongly. And I've been there again for the last 2 hours. And it's a bit much. I'll be better tomorrow. I'm a little shaken.
Months months before its release, it stunned and overwhelmed a special preview audience. It's the movie they couldn't wait to talk about. The movie is Midnight Express.
What movies did you see that you really loved, Danny?
I loved Midnight Express.
Which is?
Which is the film about Billy Hayes, the American boy from Babylon, Long Island, who was given life imprisonment in a Turkish jail. I think
he was on this
you've had him on the show.
Right.
The film has turned out brilliantly. It makes too much sense, of course, to win a prize in Cannes.
And the film was not so much a hit as a scandal.
The Columbia Pictures and Casablanca Filmworks production so angered the Turkish government, they reportedly took steps to see that the excellent film won no major festival awards.
The critics from all around the world were just incredibly aggressive about the film, thinking that it was too anti-Turkish. The first question I had, I sat there and I was like a lamb to the slaughter, really. First question was, Mr. Parker, why have you made this CIA-backed fascist scandal? And that's kind of a hard question to answer. I go, I'm sorry about that if I have.
I think the Turkish government had done a job again, and had certainly made representations and had been quite a lot of fuss. They had a claque, I always felt, in the press conference, who accused the film of being racist, and this racism thing. That's where it didn't. It all coalesced around the film, the notion of the film being racist, and it was a very, very hairy experience.
C'est qu'aussi tout le monde était stupéfait de la violence de ce film. Bon, il y a eu un débat qui s'est instauré à propos de ce film, du fait que l'action se passait en Turquie. On y a vu un certain racisme.
Every city that the film is opened in has created controversy. It's affecting governments. The Turkish government has officially protested the opening in every city it's been in.
Putnam and Goober were thrilled at all this international brouhaha. Banned in Turkey. They caused a riot at the Cannes Film Festival. I'm sure they envisioned that too, and that helped.
Governments do not learn easily that the best way to publicize a film is to ban it.
But as you look back now, perhaps they also contributed to the success of the movie because they made such a big song and dance in the media and also kind of in one way indirectly kind of promoted the movie, right? Without a nickel being spent by Hollywood. So it was brilliant, actually.
Alan and I had been to the two other cinemas on 3rd Avenue the film was playing, and we'd sat in this tiny little cubbyhole of an office with the manager, and we sat and talked about how the film was going, and he said, oh, it's going okay, it's going okay. And the phone rang, and he picked up the phone and he said, fuck off. I said, what's that? He said, you don't want to know. He said, it's been happening all day. I said, what's going on? He said, well, my instructions here is if I hear a bomb threat, I have to clear the cinema. He said, I'm not clearing the cinema, so I don't give him a chance to even off the bomb threat. We left the cinema.
One of the unexpected consequences of Midnight Express is you would think the government might go nuts, U.S. government did. Instead,
The DEA went after the film positively, said this is the best statement for being careful about not using drugs and not transporting drugs that we've ever seen.
we said, no, that'll kill the film with the young audience. Do not support it.
I think you should think Midnight Express is up there almost with the Full Monty in terms of return on investment. I mean, they're two spectacular small films that returned a lot of money. You know, Midnight Express had all sorts of records. They had to change the law in Spain because of the number of weeks it was in the cinema. I think it was in the same cinema for 3 years or something. And they actually created a law where a film couldn't stay in the same cinema for more than a year.
When I saw the movie, people were already raving about it because it had been shown at Cannes. So when obviously I'm grateful because it was my first movie produced, big movie, a small movie by Columbia standards. When you started to hear about it in Cannes in '78, my career shot up just on the hearsay.
I didn't know how effective this film was going to be in terms of the worldwide animosity it created against the Turks. It was like my story. Okay, I was in the prison sucks, yeah, they beat you, yeah, people die. That could be America, that could be Russia, that could be any prison, so I didn't have a problem with that. But the overall impact of what people saw as who Turks were and who Turkey was, I didn't get that at first.
Yes, I mean, is there a prison that is nice? But I'm not sure the display of Turkish people being.
Maybe we should have had a few nice Turks in it. It didn't occur to us really. In fact, the opposite. I remember saying to Oliver, I said, when you see all those Nazi films about, there's always Fritz who sells the cigarettes to the prisoner. Because you've got to have a good German, and we didn't want to do that. It was tokenism, we thought.
The year that happened, I mean the film, the movie, I think that that was a very bad year for Turkey psychologically in terms of tourism, in terms of public relations. And this really continued, you see, as far as the opinions in the international community.
Film is shown, cancellations Russian. Film is shown, cancellations Russian. The movie is scaring away potential tourists.
Anytime there's a four-letter word that starts with F called fear, you're going to have a problem with people, especially Americans. Americans are the most fearful travelers in the world, and they're the most geographically ignorant. You combine that, that's lethal.
I read the book, and from my recollection, from my personal knowledge, the book is reasonably accurate. At least any of the dealings I had with Bill and any of the circumstance that I had direct knowledge of, the book was a fair representation. The movie was totally fabrication.
I was part of the protest. I was part of a group that felt that, hey, our voice needs to be heard. Yes, we protested. Yes, we protested. And we weren't there for any violence, but we were always prepared.
I was living this story, and I, as a naive and innocent victim of the Turkish justice system, I felt that Billy had the right to condemn them as a barbarian people.
I think it's ironic that apparently that was again a figment of Hollywood's creation, that no such scene ever took place and that he never did say that. But of course, the people watching the movie didn't know that.
I never singled out Turkey as the bad guy, but I guess that's the impression, and that's what I apologized for. I said, I regret, I didn't even say apologize when I went to Turkey in 2004. I said, I regret the misunderstanding that resulted from the film. And I believe that's the quote. So there was no apology. This was really a misunderstanding. But I stand behind the film, and I stand behind the concept that Turkish justice was completely screwed up.
Never, ever will ever apologize for what we did. I will apologize for not being good enough to make a more complete film, yes, of course. But as a work of art, that's how it is. You make a work of art for a particular period of time, and you stand by it.
Absolutely no one was making any anti-Turkish film. Nobody. Nobody had any interest in that. The view was that was an incident that happened in Turkey, and we said it happens all over the world. And the idea was, be warned. This is a dangerous enterprise.
The movie still upsets Turkish people. And you say, but it's just a movie.
If somebody says to me that this was just a movie, I would probably tell them, walk in my shoes almost every day. Every day, we're involved in some type of fight every day. And if you look closely, you'll see that there's no cartilage left in my nose. But you should see the other guys.
It was just after the movie had broke in Europe, and there were riots in Holland and picketing in England and a whole series of protests. And Billy, the thought was send Billy on a national and international promotion tour. And we booked him into several cities, and all of a sudden, we got a little quiet call from the State Department and said, if he lands in Germany, there's a good chance he'll be extradited back to Turkey.
If the Interpol warrant did show up after he disembarked from a plane or went through a customs post by car, he could conceivably be detained and be transferred back to Turkey.
Billy and I grew up in the same town, North Babylon, Long Island, New York. Suburbia, very middle class, middle of the road, good Catholics, very traditional families. And we connected in 7th grade.
Billy looked like the most innocent person that you ever met. Blonde hair and blue eyes, but you know, there was the other side that was the rascal.
Billy wanted to be a writer, and he wanted life experiences, so he could get fodder for his books that he wanted to write.
He certainly got
he
that,
succeeded
didn't he?
very well.
Well, I mean, when you run with the Bulls at Pamplona and you ride 20-foot hurricane waves, and you know you ride on the front bumper of a van doing 60 miles an hour, or you're strapping hashish to your stomach and doing stuff like that, you're an adventurer.
There were a lot of things which supposedly is where I should have gone in my line. I went through school and high school, and I went to college, and I was finishing my college, and I guess I would have gone somewhere else along this line. I was also supposed to go in the Army and do my time, Vietnam, all of which I began to really question and eventually reject.
Billy got his 4F, basically faked being crazy and was
A
like...
little prophetic, don't you think?
Yeah, and got out of the draft that way. My father was very much against that. He thought that would be a stigma Billy would carry the rest of his life.
I think he was always upset that his son would never just follow the rules.
In the 60s, particularly 1969, when I went there, Istanbul was the center of the hippie world. People traveling back and forth from the east and the west all stopped in Istanbul. It's the only country that spans 2 continents, and it's got this incredible history, all of which I had known because I'd read about it. So I felt like I knew Istanbul before I went there.
American kids were traveling Europe and Asia for $5 a day, and we were all doing it. We were a generation of people who did drop out. Billy wasn't atypical of a large number of younger people in the 60s in both America and in Western Europe. So it was exotic to travel to Turkey.
It was one of the major places that the international hippies were flocking from all over the world and everything, and they used to come to Istanbul because the hashish was very cheap.
At that time in Istanbul in the early 70s, all the hippies hung out in the Sultan Ahmet district of Istanbul. This is where the mosques were, the Blue Mosque, the other mosques of Istanbul, and there was the pudding shop there. And this was the place to be, to eat, to get information about traveling further east. And I guess, you know, it was the place to buy hash if you were willing to take the risk.
I went to the pudding shop, tried to score some hash. I had a little bit of adventures back and forth, but I got ripped off by a couple of guys who they could see me coming. I thought I was James Bond, international man of intrigue. And I was just a fool.
Well, here is the situation on that airstrip in the Jordanian desert, 30 miles from Amman. Arab guerrillas hold as captives some 300 nationals from the United States, Britain, West Germany, Switzerland, Israel, even now from some Arab land.
Prior to October 1970, when I got busted, the PLO had just hijacked the first of the jets and blown them up out in the Jordanian desert. So all of the airport security control that's so common now, it just started.
Prior to that, nobody searched you getting on an airplane. I mean, again, you can get on 5 minutes before the plane left the ground with a chicken under both arms, nobody bothered you.
Maybe his problem was he didn't read the New York Times as frequently as he should have because he was taken by surprise. They weren't necessarily looking for drugs. They were looking for bombs. They were looking for explosives, which, as the movie showed, was what they originally thought they had.
My parents received a phone call from the State Department informing them that Billy was in a Turkish prison. A Turkish jail. I don't think he was in prison at that point. They called me. I was at school, called me. Very upset, obviously. I immediately came home. They didn't know the difference between hashish and heroin. So I had to explain to them it's only a form of marijuana. It's not that big a deal. You know, hopefully it won't be that bad. And then it turned out to be extremely bad.
As a result of negotiations that have been taking place between the United States government and the Turkish government has made a decision that is announcing today, which means that the cultivation of opium poppy in Turkey will completely cease within 1 year. And I want to say, Mr. Ambassador, we're very proud on this particular time to see that one of our best friends in the world, a staunch ally, has moved so effectively against one of the most dangerous threats to our young people.
The American government was putting pressure on Turkey. They wanted Turkey to demonstrate that they were giving big sentences, especially to foreign smugglers. Now, what was going on was that the Turks were only catching stupid kids like us who just wanted to smoke a bit of hash. They weren't busting anybody who was a real smuggler.
Well, I didn't know at the time that virtually all the Turkish people that selling dope, they would sell you 2 or 3 kilos, and as you walked out the door, they would phone the police, and they would get a reward from the police, plus they'd get the dope back and sell it to somebody else. So it was a circle going on like that.
Willie came along, and he was caught with 2 kilograms of hash. So he was right on the borderline. He was also caught at the airport. So he looked like a smuggler. He had all the indications of being a smuggler. So Willie had a problem.
It's something it's tough. And everybody says, gee, how could you possibly go through this and stand up under this and so on? But you have no choice, really. We have 2 other children, and we didn't have the luxury of feeling sorry for ourselves. We had to keep life going for them.
I would get mad because, I mean, I was a teenage girl, and I'd be like, he's robbed my parents of happiness. You know, why did he do this to them? And why did he do this to us?
Bill's father came to visit a few times, and I remember meeting him, a very nice man, very noble man. I felt very sorry for him because here was a son he loved dearly who made a mistake, who acknowledged he made a mistake. And Bill's father probably had a difficult time understanding the climate, the environment, the culture that affected this, but loved his son and wanted to do everything he could for him.
Willie was in anguish about his dad and what he had done to drag his dad through this rotten system.
Prison just forced me to slow down because I couldn't get out, and I had to like settle in where I was, and the pull of wanting to get out. Every fucking moment. In my head, I was already free. I had a calendar. I was crossing off 56, 55, 54 days prior to going free. The American consul showed up unexpectedly. I thought, oh, the Turks are letting me out early. And I walked out, and as soon as I saw his face, I knew bad news. Something terrible. I was worried somebody at home, somebody hurt, somebody sick at home. Bad news for sure. Not for me, of course. I'm going free in 54 days. And he said, you know, the High Court in Ankara has rejected your original sentence, and you're going to be resentenced, and you'll be given a life sentence, which, life? No, you don't understand. I'm going free in 54 days.
Nobody knew about Billy Hayes until he was going to be released, and he wasn't released. And the Turks appealed the case due to that poppy growing situation.
Turkey is the world's major producer of the opium poppy, the source of heroin. 3 years ago, Turkey, in return for more than $37 million in American aid, agreed to ban until 1975 at least the growth of opium poppies. But now Turkey has reneged on that agreement and has resumed cultivation.
The way the ban was issued, created strong reactions among the local people.
Poppy is a very valuable crop, and also it upsets a lot of people that they can't grow it. You know, that is a way of life in the Middle East as it is in Afghanistan. And for America to come in with its Puritan ethics and say, you can't grow any poppy, you know, it's a big deal. And when America started pushing Turkey around, that's when Turkey got angry, and maybe they took it out on Hayes.
It's hard for me to believe that that type of change of a sentence did have something to do with Nixon's policy and with a kind of bullying again.
They brought me into the court, and the same judge who had originally sentenced me to 4 years and 2 months had to take the order that came down from Ankara, which is the high court in Turkey, and he said, I wish I'd retired before I had to impose this sentence, but I have no choice. He said, my hands are tied. This comes down from Ankara. So he had to sentence me to life, which the only prerogative he had was to lower the life to 30 years, which he did.
He was just crushed. I think he was in total shock at the time. Disbelief, as anyone would react, and with the anticipation of, I'm almost out, all I need is the sentence approved, and I can go home and leave this nightmare behind me, and now I've got 30 years to serve. How am I going to do that?
Lucky I had the yoga, literally the light-on yoga in my bag as I stood there getting busted. Fortuitous? Yes. And I started really working it and using it physically every day in postures to take some control over an uncontrollable situation, because all I could control was me.
You know, if we held the asanas, the positions, for 15 seconds, he would hold them for 60 seconds. If we held them for 60 seconds, he would hold them for 10 minutes. You know, he had that amazing concentration and discipline, but it was all for escape.
My dad and I, in our letters, we used a lot of colloquialism. We talked about midnight flyer, the midnight ghost, the midnight express. This was all prison terms of escaping. And midnight express was you take the midnight train out of the prison.
Just afraid he'll try to get out and they'll shoot him. That's how he is. He'd rather be dead than over in Turkey for 30 more years in that kind of a prison, because Billy loved being free and loose. He loves the beach. You know. I just can't see him sitting there that long, and I'm sure I would rather see him dead than cooped up over there for the rest of his life.
We felt that we could live with 3 years. We had lived with it. So it's coming to an end, as you know, July 17th.
I thought.
But now this is a different ballgame.
He knew I was going to do something, and money is a key to any prison escape, because you have to bribe, you have to buy things. Bribery, everything in Turkey works on bakshish. Every single thing works on bribery. So I needed the money for that. So Dad and I were talking about Mr. Franklin, Ben Franklin, and he came to visit after the 30-year sentence, and he had a big photo album. He's cutting the back out of a photo album, opening it up, and pasting $20, $100 bills into this thing, and pasting it all up, and then putting all these photos of my sister and the family.
I remember the photo album and getting that prepared for my father to go over there with. And my biggest fear then was that they were going to discover the money in the photo album, and my dad was going to get thrown in jail.
If they had caught him, my dad would have been in the same prison as me, which is stunning to me to think about, that he would do this. And this is a guy who never, ever lied.
He had no formulated plan until he got to Imrala. And Imrala Island is in the middle of nowhere. It's 20 miles from the nearest land.
It had a reputation of being unescapable, a bit like Alcatraz, with currents that went through, that made it meant you couldn't swim it, Willie thought he had a good chance.
We took the boat, we got to the island, and I said something to the effect of, I'm here to see Billy Hayes. And they said, we don't have any prisoner named Billy Hayes. I said, but he's the American prisoner here. And the Turkish authorities said, but we don't have any American prisoner here. Well, obviously none of it made any sense, and when I went back to the consulate, I said, something here is amiss.
So the State Department called my folks, informed them of that, so it was great, he escaped.
But
where is he? Did he even make it? All they knew is that they found that rowboat.
with blood in it, because his hands were bloody.
Were so bloody, yeah.
If anybody could escape, he could. He was clever. He was wily. It just rang true with everything that I knew about Willie. I mean, that a story of approaching the border at night and then go through a minefield and him having to swim across the river between Turkey and Greece. The Greeks couldn't believe it. When they found Willie, they couldn't believe he'd crossed over the border from Turkey because the minefield was too dangerous.
I thought Billy Hayes' escape was really wonderful. First of all, because I liked him. Secondly, because I thought that the sentence he had been given was way out of proportion to the crime he had committed. I was relieved because we didn't know for a couple of weeks if he was dead or not.
I was in Athens at the time. My receptionist said, Mr. Zajac, the American consulate in Northern Greece, wants to talk to you. So I picked up the phone and he said, Gene, this is Jim Murray. I said, hi, Jim, how are you? What's up? He said, I've got someone here that claims he knows you, wants to talk to you. I said, who is he? He said, Bill Hayes. I said, uh-oh. Let me talk to him. First thing I said was, are you okay? He said, yeah, I'm okay. The Greeks held me for about a week, interrogated me, thought I was a spy crossing the border. The next thing I said, did you talk to your father? He said, yes, I've talked to my father, told him I'm here, and he's sending me a ticket. I said, good.
He called me from Greece to tell me that he was being put on literally the first plane out. And at that point, because of all the newspaper and media and television shows that we had done, Billy Hayes became a relatively well-known figure, particularly on Long Island.
He said, it's been such an emotional time for me in the last several weeks. He said, I think on the way home, I'm just going to stop off in Amsterdam and decompress for a while before I can face my parents. I said, Bill, don't you do that. Don't even think about that.
There were several articles in various Turkish newspapers depicting my story. One of them was a front-page, multicolored drawing of this blonde-haired prisoner, shirt off. I should look like that with these muscles, cutting the rope on the rowboat, because they knew that that's how I escaped. So that was there. They had another story in the front page of another one, a picture of the island and a picture of me getting busted, and a photo of this beautiful, dark-haired woman who they said was Jane, my American actress girlfriend, never seen this woman in my whole life, who was financed, she came with a motorboat that was financed by my American millionaire businessman father, which my dad loved. They just made all this up, and it was the front page story of how I escaped. So I'm reading right from the beginning all of these various versions of my story.
There's this fallacy among Turkish people, ones that I meet all the time, that he got some kind of help, that there was a CIA, that there was some type of plan. The Turks are great at telling these fables regarding this incredible escape.
He cannot do it by himself. He's not well equipped. He doesn't have a big boat. It's a good adventure for the James Bond movies.
So nobody could believe it, but I could believe it because that is Billy Hayes.
Hayes escaped. It was a great escape. It was certainly in my draft. I wanted them to shoot that escape. I was told later that in that indirect way that you always hear something. It wasn't even told to me that they were going to cut the ending because it was too expensive and they were running out of money and they'd been on Malta.
We wrote a lot of it whilst we were there. You know, was extremely sorry. You know, years after, I met him once, just by coincidence. He came to me and he said, "You followed that trial and all that. You know, I must confess to you that really, I mean, I thought that this was unfair for this boy, because he didn't mean it. I mean, he didn't mean to smuggle. He was not a member of a ring, and eventually he said, it was a good thing that he could escape. Good for him and good for our relations, because he was becoming a nuisance.
People from different angles, everybody's got a different angle on this story, and it continued to be that. I know what it is, but I don't even know what it is anymore.
Oh, Billy.
Jesus Christ.
I'm just messing with you. Remember Midnight Express? Oliver Stone won the Academy Award for Best Screenplay. Awesome scene. Sarge!
The girlfriend, I don't know if she existed or if she ever bared her breasts in the jail. I'm not sure. Maybe that was my idea.
There was a real-life similarity to the breast scene in the movie.
Shot. And considering everything I saw, I had some suspicions that maybe this wasn't the first time Billy Hayes smuggled some drugs.
He was arrested with 4 pounds, 2 kilos of hashish. That's not for recreational use. That was smuggling for profit. I knew he couldn't tell me that he had done that before in the past, but I couldn't come up with any other conclusion.
We had had a number of conversations, Oliver even more so, where he swore up and down that he was basically, it was the first time he'd ever done it, and it was completely disproportionate. To suddenly announce at Cannes that it was the 3rd or 4th time he'd done that. And I, to this day, not sure if it's true or not.
Crossing the border is a harrowing experience. I had a friend who was trying to bring some marijuana in from Mexico, and the line was so long at the border, he smoked up all this stuff while he sit there waiting.
Okay, panel, ready? Will a real Billy Hayes please stand up? Yeah.
I made 4 hash trips. April 1969, October 1969, and April 70. My 4th and last trip was in October of 1970.
He had actually approached me before he made his first trip and asked me to borrow money to go and finance his trip. And I didn't do it. I told him no, I thought he was crazy, which was his nickname.
He said, yeah, I'm traveling around Europe and I'm getting money by selling hash. And he said, I actually got some home and I'm sure that we bought some of it from him.
I made about $5,000 selling the hash to all my friends. Again, 1960s, everybody smoked hash, and this was the best product around.
I did not know, didn't have a clue that he had already smuggled grass 3 times from Turkey. If I had known that, I don't know what I would have done. It wouldn't have been the same story, and I don't think Columbia Pictures would have made the film. I don't know what Peter Guber knew, but certainly it was dishonest because the idea in the movies, he was an innocent. He was just doing something that seemed he could get away with and make some extra money.
No, Charlie.
They've got him at the airport, chewing gum with sweat pouring off him. And that's like I said, Brett, I would have busted you myself. I mean, I was cool. I was trying to, get through. I'd done this before. I knew what I was doing. I was fine at the airport until I looked and saw the soldiers all around the bus. Then I wasn't so fine.
I had to do interviews with him and Brad in a number of different countries. And so I listened to him give his answers to every question. He never ever mentioned that fact. He went along with the character he saw on the screen. As I say, he left behind the truth and the reality of his own life. He started to believe the flickering image.
When I got back, I wanted to write my book and I wanted to say the truth about everything. When I was first busted, I couldn't admit to the Turkish court that I'd done this. I said it was my personal use. They never asked me if this was my first trip, and I certainly didn't volunteer any information. So when I got out and came back, I wanted to talk about the truth about this, because I don't have any moral qualms about smuggling hash. Quite the opposite.
Those in the movie business should probably vet stories a little more carefully, because yes, what they do is entertainment. Yes, what they do is a good means of recording some documents, some facts, but I think vetting is very important.
But maybe it's good that we didn't know that, in a way, because we wouldn't have liked him in the first place. Might not have wanted to make a movie about him.
You ever seen Midnight Express?
Yeah.
He panicked. He froze.
I know. I'm not.
Do you remember what happened to him?
Yeah.
In Turkish community, people are always talking about him. He is a kind of evil.
Turkey is transfixed over the plight and the fame of Billy Hayes. They feel that they've been defamed by Billy Hayes.
His legacy is still bad. I mean, bad reputation. 80–90% of Turks still think that he's the enemy of Turkey.
The toll it took on Turkey, on their national psyche. Forget about their tourism, just the national psyche. Every Turk had to deal with the fact that people hated their country because of this movie, and it made them feel bad, and it made me feel bad, and I wanted to do something about that. Here we are. Odd feeling. I'm applying for a passport to go back to Istanbul? No, really? Yes, really? No, yes, no, yes. They made inquiries in Turkey. They were refused. We tried again a year or so later, back to the council. They contacted and they were refused again. So ironically, I wanted to go back to Turkey and they wouldn't let me go back.
I wouldn't be surprised to know that Bill would be persona non grata still by the Turks, that they don't want to see him back there.
I contacted a couple of different Turks here in various attempts to go back, one of whom was a woman connected with a group of Turkish American women, and they wanted me to be one of the guest speakers.
I get a lot of emails asking if it was a good idea to invite Billy Hayes to our Republic Days ball.
Suddenly, the request was rescinded.
I mean, they will just say, well, why did I come here if this guy was here?
Again, it was another example of the ironic push-pull. Now that I want to go back, they won't let me back. Now that these women want me to speak, other people won't let me speak. I didn't like being hated by a whole country. It just doesn't feel good. I was pretty much going to give up until we made contact with Ahmet Ertegun, probably one of the most famous, probably wealthiest Turks in the world. Ahmet was going to take back to Turkey, put it on television back there, then the request to go back to Turkey would be granted.
You know, the Midnight Express experience was a dreadful one for Turkish people.
I know.
It really gave an image which was not only wrong, but very damaging. And the fact that the picture was shown so often for so long.
I would like to heal the breach between myself and Turkey. I would like to have it so that I don't have a nation of people who hate me and feel that they have been misrepresented by me and my story. I'd like to try and balance that.
If I'm not mistaken, you're saying that you have a feeling in your heart of sadness about the fact that you were involved in what turned out to be this depiction of Turkey.
Yes.
And that you would like to clear your own conscience.
Yes.
I think this is a message which people in Turkey would like to hear. Well, thank you, Mr. Hayes, and I wish you good luck.
Teşekkür ederim Efendi Bey.
Ben teşekkür ederim. Yakında görüşmek üzere.
A towering figure in the music world has died, Ahmet Ertegun. He founded Atlantic Records in the 1940s and signed some of the biggest names in the industry. Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin, Led Zeppelin, and many others recorded on his label. Ahmet Ertegun slipped and fell at a Rolling Stones concert in October. He later lapsed into a coma and died today. He was 83.
Without Ahmet to present it, the piece never got shown. All of our hopes seemed to be dashed. I pretty much gave up and thought, this is never going to happen, and let it go. And of course, as in the case often, when you let something go, something else comes in. Here's my new passport. Oh, it's an old passport, but there's my visa to go to Turkey. Special visa allows me in for 5 days. This explains why I'm coming back, because we know I'm going to get some interesting stuff at customs, because my name will pop up in the computer.
Unbelievable. If someone would have told me that the moon was actually made of green cheese, I would have believed that more than that Billy Hayes was invited to go back to Turkey.
I would be surprised to hear that Bill got an invitation from the Turkish National Police to attend a conference on global policing. Times have changed.
The Turkish National Police, it's one of the oldest government institutions in the world. They were established many centuries, and they're always like liberal and try to understand people, even global level. So because of the reputation on the movie about also Turkish National Police, they decided to invite him and try to show what the real Turkey is.
I'm not thinking of Turkey as it is today. I'm remembering being there, and I'm remembering the terror. I think it would be crazy.
I would advise him not to. Only because of the politics that he's created via the film, plus the politics of it at the moment is not very stable anyway. There's very sort of big Muslim fundamentalists. He'd be hated by them anyway.
Typical Billy Hayes. I love that country. I love those people. I want to go back. I have to go back. And I'm not afraid.
My mom's very nervous. She's happy for me, but she's very nervous about this. So my brother will stay in close contact with her.
Why can't he apologize where he is? Is he on the moon? Why does he have to make that visit? Why does it have to be a visit that probably reignites something that he's looking for? What's his agenda?
No, my biggest concern is that nobody gives a shit, that I'm totally irrelevant. People could care less about me and all my bullshit and all this life and all the Midnight Express crap, and nobody's gonna notice or care. That's probably my biggest concern.
Going back to Turkey is absolutely the right thing to do for Billy, not just for himself, but karmically for the Turks.
I'm beginning to feel a little trepidation. I know they're going to allow me back in and not stop me and arrest me at the airport tonight at midnight.
Once you leave the United States, the Constitution doesn't travel with you. Who would know what he would be subjected to by the police and whether or not this was an opportunity to get him back and to severely punish him once again? It's Billy being Billy.
We're in Istanbul and it's midnight.
Be very cautious, my friend. Be very cautious indeed. I can understand your need to go back to Turkey. There were many good people I met, inside the prison and outside, but I'd be having nightmares if I was asked to go back. So perhaps he's being very courageous. Perhaps he's being very foolish.
When I stepped off the plane, there were 4 Turkish policemen there. Those gentlemen were at my side 24/7 for the whole time I was in Istanbul. These Turkish policemen brought me in very quietly, in secret. They told me that this is dangerous for them and they have to be very careful about how they present this to the Turkish community right there in Istanbul.
The second Istanbul Conference on Democracy and Global Security.
One point, I know I was sitting in the huge auditorium with 1,000 policemen from 63 countries. Several people afterwards said, you had this very sheepish look on your face. Hello, I'm sitting in Istanbul surrounded by 1,000 cops. Yes, I was feeling very sheepish at the time. Suddenly, news broke and something had changed. Apparently, my lawyer back in New York outdid himself and notified the press in New York, and that word spread like wildfire through Turkey, and my cops were all totally freaked out. They weren't sure if I had sabotaged them.
I did it out of a paternal instinct. Could you imagine the anger of the U.S. public, of our State Department, that if a government tricked an American citizen going back to Turkey by having the police pay his way and coming up with this ridiculous scenario? I thought it was a scam.
If this thing doesn't work out, these guys could have gotten thrown in jail. Certainly, they would be kicked out of the police force. There was some very tense couple of hours there until they ascertained that this wasn't something that I had done, but once it seemed as if it was going to be okay, and suddenly we were informed that we're going to the press conference, like right now.
Portrayal of prison in Turkey and of Turks in this movie was not accurate, and it left a false impression that all Turks were like those people in the film. This obviously is not true. There were no good Turks in the movie. I wish they had shown some good Turks in the movie. It would have helped balance the bad image that the film created, but they didn't.
I had a chance to speak Mr. Oliver Stone a few years ago about Midnight Express, and what he says to me was, it wasn't his story, it was completely your story, and he didn't make any change on the story.
But for me, one of the biggest changes was the courtroom speech. I didn't say that. I think one of the most damaging things for Turkey was to have Billy Hayes in this film make the speech in court about I hate you all, of a nation of pigs. That was a horrible speech.
If it is not your story on the screen, then do you blame Oliver Stone?
Do I blame Oliver Stone? No, I think Oliver Stone was just one piece in the making of this movie. He wrote the script. Alan Parker directed the film. Giorgio Moroder did the music. Very powerful music, which, again, all of these factors made this film a powerful movie. If it hadn't been, if it was a bad film, no one saw it, we wouldn't be here today because it wouldn't have had the effect that it did.
Service had helped you and they took you to the river and give to CIA agents, etc.
I understand. I have heard so many different stories of who helped me and how I escaped. I've also heard that my mother worked with the CIA to help me get out. If you knew my mother, you would know how funny that is. She's a wonderful, loving woman, but she doesn't leave Long Island, much less come to Turkey and work with the CIA.
Once we did the conference and things seemed to be okay, and the Turks realized that they actually have pulled this off, and it is the good thing they wanted, because I did the international conference and the whole world heard me talking and saying what I wanted to say about Turkey. I wanted to go out and do a little traveling, and I think they were a little hesitant, but you know what? I had given them what they wanted, and they wanted to help me out, so they took me out, and we got to wander the streets of old Istanbul. I was blown away when I got there because the old section of Istanbul was the same. New Istanbul, the skyline, Istanbul is a huge, booming economy. The Sultanahmet prison is now a Four Seasons hotel. They've been going around the world finding odd, interesting places to create hotels out of. And out in front of the place was a doorman dressed up, looked like a Vatican guard. He was greeting all the tourists. We came up and he said, "Oh, welcome, welcome. Have you been here before?" I said, "Oh, that's a really long story."
It was the first place when I was arrested where they brought me for one night, and then they took me out to the main prison. And it's an incredibly beautiful hotel, so things change. I don't remember the fountain. I hope I have changed as much as this place has changed, because both of us would be for the better. Certainly the Four Seasons for the better.
I wanted to go to the pudding shop. So much had happened for me. So to go back to the pudding shop was sort of the height of the whole experience for me.
This was my favorite place to come. I used to come down here and have my soup lunch. I would have yogurta and those other things, and then travel out.
Some stickers and postcards. He made us popular. After the movie, nobody has a picture here.
These guys did so well because I talked about the pudding shop in my book and the film, and they made so much money, they bought the hotel next door.
To find out that something from Midnight Express did some good to Turkey as opposed to all the bad, euphoric is how I feel. I feel welcome.
Very strange to hear the Hoca singing in the mornings out from the mosque the morning I was in Istanbul. The sound of that Hoca singing in the morning, I used to get up at 4:35 in the morning to do my yoga and meditate, and invariably I would hear the sound of the Hoca outside, and that sound to me became associated with my quiet, early morning meditative time, so I really love it. I got to stand out on the street. The prison itself has got a big wall around it with barbed wire across the top, and then there's the prison inside. Up on the second floor of the prison, out through the bars, I used to sit against those bars and look down across the barbed wire and see the street and see life and see women and dogs and cars and stuff. To look out of the prison was amazing up on those bars, and then to be actually standing on that spot out in the street looking back across the wall and across the barbed wire up at that window that I used to stare out was just, it was such a bizarre transition. Whew.
Bill had mentioned in one of the visits that he had heard that other prisons had gone out to Bakırköy, which was the mental hospital outside of Istanbul, that this might help him. I did not think that was a good idea. I said, Bill, don't do that. I think that's going to hurt you more than potentially help.
I'm a little freaked about going to Bakırköy because for me, it was probably the most bizarre experience of my entire life. Oh my God, yes, this is definitely it. And it does look abandoned. It's empty in there, I think. Whew, wow. This is the strangest place I have ever been in my entire life, is inside these walls, inside Bakır. This is a Section 13 for the criminally insane, which I was criminal and I was fairly insane by the time I got here, and I was almost insane by the time I got out. That's how strange this was. The yard when I came in had essentially different people hanging and laying on the walls or on the floor. People were in little shorty pajamas. And again, this was for the criminally insane, so the people in here were truly out of their minds, and the conditions were rather horrific. I looked up at these walls thinking, how can I get over? I don't know if you can see, there are big cracks in the walls. I think if I could make my way up to the top, I could somehow get over the barbed wire. Again, it was a crazy thought, but it was a crazy time for me. There were screaming, crying, naked guys, people dirty with sores on their body. One guy kept asking me, do you have a cigarette? Say because it just flipped him out, but I couldn't deal with it anymore. I'm getting out of here. I think I've had enough of Bakırköy. I think I've had enough. I've actually been feeling very good while I've been back in Turkey. I'm not feeling so good now. This was a very frightening place for me.
I worry about him. I'd like him to have a steady job. He wants to be a writer. Well, he is a writer, I guess.
We're not going to get a steady job.
You're too old.
I think you've given up on that, yeah.
It's his own life to live, you know. I don't tell him what to do. Just to behave himself.
And to make sure I keep Wendy next to me.
Yes. She's a wonderful girl.
She is.
I mean, to put up with him all those years.
Hey,
Went through.
put up with him all these years. I'm sitting here. I'm sitting right here.
Suppose your entire life was involved with a major event that had such impact on more than one country. How is it possible to extricate yourself from that at all?
If you're saddled with this reputation that you're Billy Hayes, and if you can make some money off of it, then you should do it. I mean, this is now his life. Whether he likes it or not, this is the way he's identified. If you could turn it into bucks and keep the train rolling along the track, God bless him.
I was arrested at the Istanbul airport, October 7th, 1970, with 2 kilos, 4.4 pounds of prime Turkish hashish, marijuana, taped all over my 23-year-old body. When I look back now, the idiocy of that move is hard to understand, but it seemed like a good idea at the time.
The Turkish people are very sensitive when it comes to Turkey and the reputation of Turkey. Even some people said, oh, let's go to the theater and protest this show.
Why do I need to go sit through this agony again? I don't want to go into that dark room again. I've come out of that dark room. I don't want to go back there.
Ladies and gentlemen, Consul General of the Republic of Turkey, thank you, sir, for coming. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of Turkey, I am particularly happy to see our beautiful flag raised here where New York City was founded and where so much American history has taken place. The model partnership between our countries and the friendship between our peoples are solid and will get stronger. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank Billy Hayes in joining the Turkish-American community in this special day. I am sure Mr. Hayes will mark today as a significant day in his calendar as well.
He is absolutely in a more positive place than he's been in a long time.
Let me welcome this man whose ordeal in a Turkish jail provided the basis for the 1978 classic movie Midnight Express, my good friend and the friend of Turkey now, Billy Hayes.
I want to thank the Honorable Consul General, all of the Turkish officials who are here, my friend Ibrahim Kurtulus for inviting me to this ceremony today, where we celebrate the great work of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk in creating and founding the Republic of Turkey. The irony of the moment is not lost upon me. I can only hope that my gesture here today will be a symbol not only of independence, but of healing and balance and forgiveness. Inshallah. Thank you very much. Çok teşekkür ederim.
I was looking at Billy Hayes, and I was interested in what was coming out of his heart. It put to rest a storyline that lived with me for 20 plus years, and Billy Hayes put it to rest.
It would be maddening to see this movie if I were a Turkish person. It would be maddening to have to answer to the movie all the time. And the movie's going to live on and always play, and it will never go away.
You're lucky if people remember your film 5 minutes after they've seen it. For it to have an impact and for people to still be talking about it 35 years later, you think, well, maybe you did something right.
question, it's just a comment.
Yes, sir.
I think you've helped so many people from your experience. I always taught my kids, before you go travelling, you're watching this movie. I suppose lots of parents have.
There you go.
Yeah, in fact, I think my dad told me that. And I made my boys watch it, and they've learned a lesson.
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
No, thank you. I'd love to hear that. At the very least, my life is a cautionary tale. And if it keeps anybody from getting arrested, good. I'm very happy about that.
Do you think that drug laws should be changed?
Yes, I do think drug laws should be changed. Thank you. I think the hypocrisy of arresting people for pot especially, there is immense amounts of benefit for pot. People are going to say, Billy Hayes says go home and smoke pot. No. I'm going to say, don't smoke cigarettes, don't drink alcohol, and do yoga every day. That's what I do. But as far as arresting people, the insanity of that war on drugs that Richard Nixon pulled about 50 years ago, it's changing. This old doctor, a name tag on, he's sitting at his desk, he's got his pen, he doesn't even look up, he just says, why are you here? I said, I have a glaucoma and post-traumatic stress, and he says, okay, have you ever been arrested? Silence. He looks up, I say, in this country? He fixes his glasses, I say, yeah, I was arrested in Turkey, and then I escaped, and I wrote a book. He said, I know who you are. You need this. And he gives me my medical marijuana license, which I just love.